Chestnut Hill College, the Catherine M. and William E. Schubert Memorial Lecture in the Humanities. We're very excited that you can all join us. It's our very first Schubert lecture since the pandemic, and we're very excited to be hosting this tonight. Before we begin, I welcome Bishop Joseph Coffey to the podium to offer an invocation. Please remain standing.
Good evening, everybody. Before I give the invocation, I'd just like to take just a quick moment to say how honored I am to be here tonight for this William and Catherine Schubert lecture series. It's named after my grandparents, and I never knew them. They died before I was 2 years old, but I heard lots of stories from my mother, a graduate of this college in 1949, Rosanita Schubert Coffey. So I don't know if we're related to Dr. Thomas Schubert, the guest speaker tonight, but we might be distant cousins. But I just want to say how honored I am to be here and thank you for inviting me here tonight. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we ask your blessings tonight at this lecture series on our guest speaker, Dr. Thomas Schubert, and on Scottish singer and songwriter Dougie MacLean. May the words of the speech tonight and the songs of Dougie inspire us and help us to grow in our faith. We ask your blessings upon the students, the faculty, the staff, friends, and benefactors of Chestnut Hill College. When Jesuit Father Medai founded the Sisters of St. Joseph, he asked them to go out into the streets, find out the needs of their dear neighbors, and to circle the city with love. The sisters then founded this wonderful college with the motto Fides, Caritas, and Scientia, faith, charity, and science. Lord, help the students grow as persons with challenging academics, a lively social life, and a healthy spiritual life. The glory of God is men and women fully alive. May there be harmony and peace among us and among all the nations of the world. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Please be seated. Thank you. Thank you, Bishop Coffey. What a lovely, lovely event we're going to have here tonight. I'm so grateful to the faculty, to the students, to the staff of Chestnut Hill College. I want to thank Bishop Coffey for taking time for being here today. I want to thank Thomas Schubert for being our lecturer. I want to thank Phyllis Jablonski for finding Thomas Schubert and working with him to get him here. I want to, of course, thank Dougie MacLean and his lovely wife, Jenny, and welcome you all here tonight. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Barbara Martino, who is also a board member, to share the history of the Catherine M. and William E. Schubert Memorial Lecture.
Good evening, everyone. I see quite a few familiar faces. The Schubert family name is well known in Chestnut Hill College community. More than a dozen Schubert family members are graduates of the college. Mary Catherine Schubert Denny, class of 1940, was the first graduate with members of the Schubert, Coffey, and Rosenberger families to follow in her footsteps. Mary Catherine's son, Joe Denny, also followed his mother's lead, serving on the college board of directors for 9 years. Mary Catherine and her husband, William Schubert's legacy can be found in the leadership and volunteer service their descendants have contributed to educational, religious, and civic endeavors. Mary Catherine Schubert Denny, with her husband, Joseph Denny III, established the Catherine M. and William E. Schubert Lecture Series with an endowed gift to honor her parents with a program in the humanities and their importance to the academic world and community at large. Today we honor their memory and legacy with a lecture on the synergy of music and science presented by Dr. Thomas Schubert.
Thank you, Barbara. Our sincere appreciation to the entire Schubert family for their support and their belief in the importance of the humanities. I now invite Dr. Karen Windling, a 2003 graduate of Chestnut Hill College, an associate professor of chemistry, and the chair of our Center of Natural and Behavior Sciences, to introduce Dr. Thomas Schubert. Dr. Schubert joins other distinguished speakers who have shared their insightful experiences and gifts with the Chestnut Hill College community.
Thomas F. Schubert Jr. received his BS, MS, and PhD from the University of California at Irvine. As such, he was in the first engineering graduating class at UCI and their first triple engineering degree recipient. In 1987, after 4 years in industry and 9 years of university teaching, he was intrigued by the prospect of initiating a new engineering program. He traveled to the University of San Diego, USD, as the second of the 2 founding engineering faculty to develop a unique 9-semester program that leads to a dual BS-BA degree for all engineering students. He retired from USD in 2020. Schubert is a sincere proponent of the complete engineer. As a dual career individual, also a professional bassoonist, he feels that an engineering education is not complete without genuine and enriching breadth of study. Adventures into that arena include study abroad senior elective courses taught in a 3-week format where students not only study an advanced technical topic, but also widen their understanding of global engineering, and his symposium, Music and the Sciences, Synergies Among Musical Arts, Math, Science, and Engineering, for the American Association for the Advancement of Science, Pacific Division. He has taught engineering to liberal arts students, acoustics of musical instruments, simultaneously to both engineering and liberal arts students, and his Introduction to Engineering course was a part of the multidisciplinary living and learning communities at USD. In recognition of Dr. Schubert's outstanding, balanced career contributions supporting the mission and goals of the University of San Diego, he was awarded the title of University Professor, the highest recognition of excellence at the university. He also received several awards from the San Diego County Engineering Council and from the American Association for Engineering Education. Now, anyone who knows me as a scientist with a passion for the arts will understand why I was so keen to introduce Dr. Schubert today. As an alumna of the college and as a proud graduate from our interdisciplinary honors program, it is clear that Dr. Schubert's life and career exemplify the mission and liberal arts heritage of Chestnut Hill College. This heritage continues to thrive today, not only in the interdisciplinary honors program, but also in the new core curriculum, which offers all students the chance to experience multidisciplinary coursework and engage with real-world problems from a variety of perspectives. It is with great pride and respect that I invite Dr. Schubert to the podium for his presentation, which would make a fantastic Chestnut Hill College interdisciplinary course entitled Harmony, the Synergy Between Science and Music.
Thank you. It's going to take me a couple of seconds to get my computer running here. But I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here to give this talk, particularly the president, Dr. Latimer, and Phyllis Jabanowski for making the arrangements and finding me and that sort of stuff. So, hello, computer. We turned this on like 3 hours ago, and so. Cool, that's there. Okay. You'll have to excuse me as I have gotten old but have not recognized the fact that I've gotten old and can't see anything. One would think that after 35 years of using glasses, one would realize that they actually had to use them. Okay, so there's always some confusion about what the title of my talk will be, but basically it's music and sciences, and we're going to try to talk about some of the interactions between music and sciences. As I said, I'm a retired professor of electrical engineering from the University of San Diego, and I've played bassoon professionally for about 50 years now. And so I'm delighted to be here. So this is a very broad topic, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that interest me in this and try to narrow it down. So I'll be talking a lot about chords and scales and things like that, but we'll see where we go for that. Okay, so I'm going to start with a couple of definitions. Music is an art of sound in time that expresses ideas and motions in significant forms through the elements of rhythm, melody, harmony, and color. Sound is a pressure wave which is created by a vibrating object. These vibrations set particles in the surrounding medium, typically air, in vibrational motion, thus transporting energy through the medium. And so what I'm showing you here is something periodically beating on the end of a slinky, a very long slinky. And we're seeing waves travel through, and what's happening is the slinky is not moving, but the waves are being shown by compressed areas of the slinky and expanded areas of the slinky. And what happens is we're also seeing at the end of the slinky that there are some reflections on the end, and those are important. And we can get standing waves, and basically you're seeing compression and expansion of the slinky. And that's exactly what happens with sound and air. If the air compresses and it expands, but it doesn't go anywhere. Okay, it's not like a wind. It's just a phenomena of pressure. Okay, some more definitions, and that's mathematics. I think we all kind of know what mathematics is, and we can read this. Science is a pursuit of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world based on systematic methodology. And then the one that interests me is the engineering definition. Engineering is a profession in which a knowledge of the mathematical and natural sciences gained by study, experience, and practice is applied with judgment to develop ways to utilize economically the materials and forces of nature for the benefit of mankind. That's really self-serving kind of definition. But it comes from engineering. For those of you who don't know, engineering is accredited separately from universities. And our accreditation board used to be called the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology, now is just called ABET. They came up with this definition, and so I decided to use that as what we've got here. Okay, just to go on, I think we all know who Albert Einstein is. And Albert Einstein was also an amateur violinist, and he was very interested and had the opportunity, because of his world renown, to play with quite a few really wonderful musicians. And he's quoted as saying, "The theory of relativity," for which he's most famous, "occurred to me by intuition, and music was the driving force beyond that intuition. My new discovery was the result of musical perception." And his wife kind of amplifies that by saying, music helps him when he's thinking about his theories. He goes to his study, comes back, strikes a few chords on the piano, jots something down, returns to his study. So music, it works in mysterious ways with us all, for those of us who are involved in music and the sciences. Okay, so I'm going to start my venture here with Pythagoras. I think we all know who Pythagoras is from the Pythagorean theorem and right triangles, and we did that in math class. But he was also a great philosopher who influenced a lot of studies by later philosophers and basically the philosophy in the West in general. Unfortunately, no authentic writings by him exist. And so everything that we know about him is from writings from other people. And so some of these stories are a little bit clouded, and so we'll try to get our way through that. And at the time that he came, music was well known, scales were well known, they were there, but he was one of the first people who had tried to apply science and mathematics to music. Okay, so this starts with one of the stories, and I'll start out by saying, upon passing a metalworking shop, he noticed that various anvils struck by various hammers produced different pitches. And I say that in such a vague way because depending on who told the story, different things happen. And one of the tellings of the story is that anvils were being struck by different size hammers and they create different pitches. Well, no, it's the anvil that does the ringing, not the hammer. And so that's definitely wrong. But definitely, he was interested in what happened, but he decided to investigate how the size of various implements in music could produce the notes of the diatonic scale. And the diatonic scale is the scale that we're all used to in the Western world. 7 notes in each octave, 5 whole steps, 2 half steps. They can be placed in different places depending on what kind of a scale it is, but they all have that same basic nature of 7 notes in each octave, 2 of which are half steps. Eventually that led to a study of strings under tension, and there's a picture, a depiction of him studying that. And basically there are strings that are all of the same length. There's a cursor. The strings are all of the same length, and he has changed the tension on these strings by applying weights to the end of the strings. And some of the stories say that these weights were actually hammers. We don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, he discovered that if he doubled the weight on here by doubling the tension, that he got an octave jump. If it was a 3-to-2 ratio, he got a fifth. And those of us with musical background kind of know what a fifth is. I'll talk about that a little later. 4-to-3 ratio leads to a fourth, and things like that. And he discovered, or he deduced from that in order to do things properly, that the tensions had to be in the ratio of integers, integer ratios. Okay, and there were no pi's and square roots of 3s and weird things like that in there. And they had to all be integers. And so basically, we want to look at, basically, we'll start with strings because he started with strings, and see what happens. And basically, what I've got here is I'm doing a little simulation here of sinusoids. Basically, I'm going to see what kind of motion I can get out of this string. And basically, if the 2 ends of the string are tied together, those are fixed endpoints. Those are called Dirichlet boundary conditions. And if I set this going, I've discovered that I can have something going with 1 bump. That's a technical term. 2 bumps. Hello. 3 bumps. 4 bumps, 5 bumps, 7 bumps, 197 bumps, but they're all integers, okay? I can't have 2.5 bumps, okay, and this sort of thing. And so basically, this is kind of telling us, this is amplifying what Pythagoras was saying, in the sense that the notes have to be in integer ratios of each other. So basically, here I've tried to tie this to something that maybe some of us know, and that is a keyboard. Most of us have seen a piano keyboard, and basically we realize that these repeat every 8 notes, or 8 of the white notes. It repeats, and we see that 2 blacks, 3 blacks, 2 blacks, 3 blacks, 2 blacks, 3 blacks. We get that sort of relationship. And where it repeats, that's what we call an octave, okay? And when we count the thing, we always count the first one as 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 octave. Ooh, wow, cool. Okay, when we go to the next one here, we'll go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's a fifth. Okay, and it turns out that this is the one where we saw 1 bump. This is 2 bumps, 3 bumps, those kinds of things. That's what we're seeing in the notes of the diatonic scale. And we can call these the octave, fifth, fourth, third, those kinds of things. It turns out that in Pythagoras' time, they didn't know about frequency. Okay, they didn't know about it. First of all, the things are wiggling, and they're wiggling so fast that they can't possibly count them. Okay, and so they don't know about that. In fact, they aren't even sure that sound at different frequencies, and I'm using a term that they don't know about, but at different pitches, if it travels at the same speed. And that came later, okay, and they had to find that out. So basically what I'm going to do from that is say, okay, so I've got some notes here. How do I know if they're in tune? Well, those of us who are musicians know that when we play with somebody else, what we try to do is we're trying to get rid of the beats. Okay, we play two notes, and if there are beats between them, and what are beats? Well, what beats are is, I'm doing this mathematically, is I'm taking a sinusoid. I am exactly 12 years old, and my voice is going to jump up and down. But we'll have a sinusoid at one frequency, and another sinusoid at another frequency, and when I do the trig identities on that, what I get is something that's twice as big, and the multiplying factor of two cosines, one at half the difference in the frequencies, and one at the average frequency. And if I plot that, oh, well, I'm an electrical engineer, I recognize this as double sideband suppressed carrier amplitude modulation. You all recognize that too, right? Anyway, and so basically we're saying we get a carrier to the average frequency, and the amplitude is going to vary at half the difference frequency. So I'm going to get something that sounds basically at one pitch, but its volume is going to change in time. And what we're trying to do is get rid of that. But to get things in tune, we're trying to get rid of that variation in the amplitude. I did the easy case mathematically where the two frequencies notes are at the same volume. If they're not at the same volume, then I get single sideband amplitude modulation. The math is really messy, and you don't really want to do that, and it involves a Hilbert transform, which would take me about 45 minutes to explain, and so we're not going to do that. But what we're trying to say is, okay, so I believe that the string can vibrate in those different modes, but what happens if I take it off to one place, pull it up, and like pluck it and string? What happens? Well, we find out that through Joseph Fourier in 1822, when he was studying heat, he discovered that arbitrary functions can be decomposed into sums of sinusoids. And for the mathematicians in the room, yes, there are some exceptions, but I can't make strings do those exceptions. Okay, so we're all good here. Okay, so anyway, I've got this, and I've pulled it aside, and what I'm going to do is just add together a bunch of sinusoids at different frequencies. Okay, so there I'm adding them together. And we see that as I add more and more of them together, I get closer and closer to what my original desired thing was supposed to be. Now this is an infinite sum, and I don't think you wanted to wait infinity. So I truncated the series, and we basically get something that looks like that. And if I look at a violin that's being played, this is experimental data from a violin, I'm seeing that in fact, if I play a G on the G string, that instruments can tell me that the spectrum includes 2 times the frequency, 3, 4, 5, and basically nothing in between. Okay, so we're all good. We're feeling good about those kinds of things. And now let's go back to that plucked string and say, we know that lots of harmonics exist in this thing, but what happens when I let the string go? Okay, and we're not, certainly when I did this, I wasn't sure what that string was going to do. It's not intuitively obvious to me what it was going to do. But what I did was I took each one of those sinusoids and I let them vibrate by themselves in time and then added them back together. And we discovered that it does that. Okay, and you say, yeah, sure, I believe that. Okay, but that's what the math is telling us it does. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take a slow motion picture of it and see what happens. This bow, this is very slow motion. This bow is moving from right to left, and I'll go here, and we see something that looks very much like what I simulated. Okay, and you say, well, wait a minute, this is bowed. And that was plucked. And so there's something weird going on here. But if you look very closely right here, you see what's happening is that the bow is dragging the string over and then it's slipping. Okay, so it's very much pulling it aside and letting loose, pulling it aside, letting it loose. That was very much like what we did in our simulation. Okay, so if I decide that I want to create a scale from notes that have a spectrum, here I got my keyboard again, and I've just taken a note. This apparently is a C. It has a fundamental at C, and its first harmonic is at C. And then there's the fifth that's a G, and back to C again. And the height of these don't mean anything. They were just arbitrarily drawn. Okay, and I want to tune a note that's the fifth of that. So I want to create a G that's in tune with that first C. Okay, and what I do is I take it and I look out here and I say, aha, I'm going to take the 3 times frequency term of the C and match it to the 2 times frequency of the G until the beats go away. Okay, and then it's going to be in tune, and their ratio is going to be 3 to 2, and I'm going to have a fifth here. So this is basically how people tuned scales, and when you hear violinists and orchestra tune, their strings are tuned a fifth apart, and that's what they're doing. They're listening to the 3 times frequency matching up with the 2 times frequency of the next string over, and waiting until the beats go away. Okay, so it appears that in order to get this lack of beat sort of thing going on, that in a scale, the ratio of the note frequencies should be a fraction of integers. And if I do this, there's a picture of what happens when you add together the fundamental, the third, and the fifth of a major chord. I chose A as my fundamental frequency. 440 is what most orchestras tune to in the United States. It's also easy to do math on. So if I want to do the third, I'm going to make 440 and multiply it by 5/4. That's 550. And I'm going to take the fifth, and I'm going to take 440 and multiply it by 3/2, and I get 660. And I get this pretty picture. And what happens is each of these little wave packets here looks exactly the same, and there's no variation in the height of them. So I get a pretty tone. Okay, and later on we'll get to hear those, I hope. Okay, so anyway, when we go through this and we say, well, this seems like a good way to do things, I'll just tune everything to fifths, and I'll be happy on my way. And basically it turns out that if I'm using the fifth, I can get all the notes of the scale. Okay, that basically a fifth is 7 half steps, and as I go to the fifth, I can get G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, C sharp, A flat, D flat, D flat, F, and C back again. So it'll go through the things, it'll be 7 octaves higher, but it's back to C, and that should be the same note. And so, sounds cool. So I'll take 3/2, and I'll multiply 12 of them together, and we notice something that's not 7 octaves. 7 octaves is 2 multiplied together. An octave is doubling the frequency, and that's 128. And so basically we have a situation where, oopsie, wrong. And we should have realized that right at the beginning, because there's no way that I can take 3 and multiply it together a whole bunch of times and get an even number. It just doesn't happen. Okay, but anyway, if we look at it, there are other examples. A third is 4 half steps, an octave is 12 half steps, and so I should get 3/3 in an octave. And if I do that, I take 5/4 and multiply it together 3 times, and I get that number, which isn't 2. Okay, so anyway, so and if I try to get the third from the circle of fifths, so the third is C to E, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So I should be raising 3/2 to the 4th power and then lowering it by 2 octaves. And that's not 5/4 either. So I've got some problems about this wonderful system that Pythagoras came up with to do things. And that's notes appear to be in different places depending on what I'm trying to play. Now, this is not a big problem for singers. It's not a big problem for instrumentalists. because they can make adjustments. And they can make it so that it sounds pretty, okay, and make the adjustments. But what happens is if I'm playing a keyboard instrument where a note is, when I press down the key, it comes out that, and I don't know where I'm coming from, and it's going to come out to a different pitch. So here's one solution that people have come up with, and that's to have an octave with just a ton of notes. Okay, and this one has 36 keys per octave. I'm not sure I would have ever wanted to play this instrument, but that is a possibility to do things and basically, yeah, whatever. But lots of people have tried to solve this, to come up with good compromise solutions, and lots of very smart people, lots of different tuning systems. The one that we're currently using for most keyboard instruments today, at least in the United States, is equal temperament. Okay, and the equal temperament is saying that since the octave is divided into 12 half steps, one logical system would make the ratio between each half step equal. Okay, so that means that if I'm playing, no matter what key I'm playing in, a half step is a half step. No matter where I start, it's a half step. And so that says I'm going to take whatever that ratio is, I'm going to multiply it 12 of them together, and I'm going to get an octave. And that tells me that that ratio should be the 12th root of 2, which is this interesting number that is infinitely long. And anyway, if we look at that, look at the third, we say, well, the third is 4 half steps, so I take that ratio and multiply it together 4 times, and I get something a little bigger than what I should have had. If I look at the fifth, I multiply it together 7 times, and I get something a little smaller than it should be. But they're there. And so what's happening here is we've got a system here where we're going to play all chords on keyboard instruments so that none of them are really in tune, but they're all kind of close, okay? Rather than choose something where some of them are in tune and some of them are not in tune, we're going to choose something that's a compromise between here. And so what I've done is I've created a program here where the first 8 times you hear this A major chord, you're going to hear it with the notes as integer ratios. And the next 8 times you're going to hear it with equal temperament. And hopefully you can hear a difference. Now, sometimes I have difficulty hearing these differences because I've sat in front of trumpets way too many years. And so my ears are not as good as some people's. Ah, we've got it. Can you hear the difference? You can hear in there, right? So basically, that's what we live with now. With equal temperament, it's very interesting. As you know, I play a lot of chamber music, and if I play with instruments, acoustic instruments, that I'm used to adjusting the pitches so that I get the consonants, the kind of thing that you would hear in the first 8 notes there. I'm used to doing that, and singers are used to doing that. And then you play with a piano. You do chamber music with a piano, and you go, ooh. Ooh, the chords, I can't quite get them in tune. And for a while, you try to adjust, and then you realize that, oh, well, I'm never going to get it in tune. But anyway, let me get the other file that I'm going to need later on up. Okay, so that program is there. And we can see the difference. And if I then add together the notes the way that I did before mathematically, I see that the wave packets are not quite the same as I go from wave packet to wave packet. That's an engineering kind of term. And the volume goes up and down a little bit. And so it's a nice compromise, and it allows the sort of thing where a singer walks in and says, oh, I know you've got music that's in C, but I can't quite sing that high. Could we do it in A? It's not going to suddenly be raucously out of tune because your piano was tuned to only play nicely in A. Or C. It'll play nicely that way. So anyway, I want to go back to this theme. Okay, so basically, if I'm going to get something that's 1.59 times the previous frequency, I better know what frequency is. Okay, and so basically what happened was people didn't know what frequency was until late 17th century. Okay, and this was Robert Hooke who did this, and he created a machine where he has a toothed wheel, a wheel with lots of gears, teeth on it, and he's spinning it very fast and holding a card against it. Okay, at least in my era, we used to put playing cards on our bicycle spokes and get things like this, but this is much faster, so the pitches are much higher. And basically, he discovered by creating a set of tooth wheels that were attached on the same axis that, well, I've got to have integer ratios there because I can't have a tooth or a pi teeth on something like this. So I have a fixed number of ratios, and that if things were at the appropriate integer ratios of teeth, that he got the appropriate intervals that he was expecting. Okay? And so much later, a century and a half later, Felix Savart attached a tachometer, a rotational speed measuring device onto this, and he was able to determine what the pitches really were. And we say, oh, cool, can this really work? Does that really sound like music? Well, here we go. This is using the rumble strips on a road to play music. And basically they're just varying the frequency, the spacing between the rumble strips and getting different pitches. Okay, and the absence of rumble strip is the spaces between the notes. Okay. And you say, okay, I recognize it. Well, I don't recognize that tune, but a lot of these things in the roads, you'll see things that say, drive at this speed and you'll hear the tune. Well, does that really matter? Well, There's the same tune. It's higher, okay? But the ratios are the same. So the intervals that we're hearing in the tune, even though it's at higher pitch, the intervals are correct. And so it really is the spacing and the ratios of the frequencies that are important. Okay. So again, if we want to compare frequencies, our ears are pretty good, but they're not perfect. And certainly mine aren't. But as we go through here, a French physicist, Jules-Antoine Lissajous, excuse my French, I'm not good at these kinds of things, but basically he devised a thing to more accurately determine if things were at the same frequency. And what he's got here is a lamp that is blacked out in most of the place with a small hole to let light out, a dot of light. And he's got two tuning forks here. One which has a mirror surface on it, and it vibrates so that the dot will appear to go up and down, and one that's horizontal so that the dot will appear to go sideways. And then he's looking at it through a telescope. And basically what happens is you're going to get, I'm going to stop this, right, you're going to get ellipses of some sort. And when the ellipses are stationary, then things are in tune. It doesn't matter that they're a circle or a line or an oval, but they're in tune. What's happening is we have something that we call phase, whether the bumps line up, that determines whether it's an ellipse or a circle. But basically, if it's stationary, they're in tune. If it's not stationary, then they're out of tune. So that'll imply out of tune. Okay, and it turns out that you can get ratios of frequencies too. And the same thing applies here. The figures are different, but when it's stationary, it's in tune. When it's rotating or moving in some way, then they're out of tune. Okay, and you can get all sorts of fancy sorts of things like that. Okay, go to something else, and we'll see if we can find that. Okay, this is my personal strobe tuner. Okay, this works on a principle that those of us in communication theory talk about, and that is if we sample something that's moving or vibrating at a frequency that is at least twice what the frequency is of what we're sampling, then we can get a good picture of it. If we don't, then it's aliased down to some other frequency. And the most common thing that you've probably seen is in cowboy movies when the stagecoach comes into town and the wagon wheel rolls forward and then it stops and it rolls backward and goes back and forth as the speed changes. What's happening is the motion pictures are frames, they're still pictures that are 24 times a second, and it's capturing things and aliasing it down to some other frequency. So what happens here is we have a rotating disc where I'm rotating it at a fixed speed determined by these two dials, the pitch and a vernier fine tuning. And this has transparent and opaque segments on it, and in each band there are twice as many of them. So basically those are an octave apart. And basically I have a microphone here, and behind this there's a light that can flash very, very fast. Okay. And so when I do this, hello, I'm going to make this go. Make it go, okay. You're going to see me turn it on. And then I'll play notes into it. And what happens is when I'm playing sharp, it'll rotate to the right. And when I'm playing flat, it'll rotate to the left. And when it's in tune, it'll be stationary. Now, this is an old machine, and so the contrast is not real good, but I hope you can see that. Can you see that? Yes. And you can see that I have some variability in the pitches that I can do. So tuning things is not a terrible problem. Also, I'm playing a chromatic scale, and we'll see that some notes other than the ones that I'm doing will also preset. And that's the harmonics are lining up. And that's me playing bassoon. And here are a ton of old bassoon reeds. Okay. Anyway, there's another way. Here we go. Come on, from current slide. Another way that we have used things, phase lock loops are a very common thing in radio receivers. As an electrical engineer, I'm used to seeing phase lock loops. Basically, what they are is some receivers require that you tune the receiver to the incoming wave that's happening. Okay, and what happens, the problem with that is, well, we should all know what that is, except if they're moving, then we have the thing called the Doppler effect. Okay, and that means that if the source and the receiver are going apart from each other, the pitch will go down. And if they're going toward each other, the pitch will go up. So I need to be able to lock into that. And some clever engineers decided that, why don't we use that for a tuning device? And we'll have a local oscillator that is controlled by a knob that has the actual pitches that we should have, and then we'll play into it into a microphone, and we'll compare those. And it turns out that when I multiply the two signals together and I throw away part of it, and I get a signal that's partly, that is, after some fancy manipulating, it's proportional to the deviation signal. And I can display that on an ordinary analog meter, okay? And so this is a very common device that was used as tuners in the 70s and into the 80s. You'll see tuners nowadays that look like this, but they're all done digitally, and all the fun math is gone. Okay, so we talked about strings. There are other vibrating structures and other things besides plucking and bowing can get them going. And this is an example of the wind getting something else going. This is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, the famous Tacoma Narrows Bridge in the 30s. It was only a couple weeks old, and a 35-mile-an-hour wind got it going, and it failed. You don't want to see it fail, so we don't do that. So with wind instruments, you can excite an air column with whistles, reeds, single or double, lip reeds, buzzing your lips. And basically, there are two different kinds of boundary conditions. We still have the Dirichlet fixed value boundary conditions, where basically at the end of a tube, I actually brought some tubes. Oh, exciting. I brought some tubes, but what happens is if I have a tube like this and I'm trying to excite it, the air pressure at the end of this has got to be pretty much the atmospheric pressure. Okay, so when I'm doing that. So I can still have Dirichlet boundary conditions, but I can also have Neumann boundary conditions. And that's when I put a cap on one end. That basically, what happens is the pressure there, we don't know what the pressure will be, but it can't have a slope to the pressure, because if there was a slope to the pressure, then the air would be moving, but it's being stopped by the cap. So I have those kinds of things. So we've seen Dirichlet boundary conditions, and they're just the same here, where this is not necessarily zero, but it's an air pressure. And we still have the integer multiples. And if we look at the Neumann boundary conditions, what we have is this end will be fixed, and this one end will have a zero slope end on it. And we get motions that look like this: a half a bump, again, a technical term, a bump and a half, 2.5 bumps, 3.5, 4.5, la, 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 la. And so what we have is, instead of having, there's still integer ratios, but the even integer ratios are gone. So 2 to 1's gone, 3 to 1's there, 5 to 1's there, 7 to 1, they're all there. You know, but that is weird. And the clarinet family is the family that does that. And here is a picture of the spectrum of the clarinet family, where I have the fundamental 2 times or 3 times the frequency, 5 times the frequency, and the 2 times and 4 times are basically missing. Now this is done, the previous one was on a logarithmic scale, and so it's hard to compare these. This is on a linear scale, but nonetheless. Okay, so if I want to vary pitches in wind instruments, with string instruments, we just change the length of the string. With wind instruments, we have overtones, we have the harmonics that we can play. We can change the length of the, okay. Yeah, we can change the length of the thing. We can do slides, change the bore length. We can have valves, we can have holes. Somewhere here I'm supposed to do this. Well, apparently not. Yes, I am. So I'm going to play a little bit. This is a recorder mouthpiece and some pieces of PVC pipe. Okay, if I change the length of the tube, I get a different pitch. I can get harmonics. Okay, and if I cap the end, is this going to go up or down? It went down. Okay, I got a half a bump instead of a whole bump. Okay. There are also some interesting things that happen. I'm going to jump away from instruments here, and that difference tones is an effect of the human ear physiology, and that is our ears don't hear in a linear fashion. That we have, there's such a dynamic range. 1 dB is the threshold of human hearing, that the lowest sounds that we can hear. 120 dB is fringing on pain. Okay, and so that's a factor of 1,000,000. Okay, and so that's tough to do in a linear fashion. Okay, and so it turns out that it's a nonlinear process, and I've just written a nonlinear function, an arbitrary nonlinear function. This is the linear term. These terms out here are the nonlinear terms. Okay, and if I just look at this first one of them, and I take 2 notes and put them together, I'll get something that's squared terms and then something that's a product of the two. And then I look at the product of the 2 terms and I get something that's a different frequency and something that's the sum of the frequency. Again, pure math, trigonometry, or sort of things. And so if I look at those 2 things, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a tune, and I'm just going to play the upper notes. You may recognize that tone. And if I play the lower notes, this is a tune that I'm good at playing. Okay. And then if I play them together, I'm going to increase the volume a little bit. Now I have trouble hearing the difference tones. We should hear some pitches that are lower than these. I'm going to have some trouble because I have bad ears. But some of you may be able to hear it, And then I'll play it again with the volume increased so that I'm probably adding in some distortion. And I muted both. Both. We'll start at the beginning. Can you hear a lower note? Yes, some of you can. I'll increase the pitch, or I'll increase the volume, and probably introduce them to. You can definitely hear it. Yeah, our poor sound guys are dying. Oh, great. Okay. So sorry about that, guys. Anyway, so that is something that is just a function of our ears. The notes aren't there, right? It's just our ears are hearing something that's not there. Okay, and then just a couple things to wrap up. Some similar kinds of things that have analogies in other fields. And this is megaphones, bells, and impedance matching. Basically, this word impedance is probably new to a lot of you. What it is it's like resistance, okay? And resistance is based on the word resist, right? And impedance is based on the word impede, okay? And so it's just, it's a kind of resistance with some more information in it, okay? And basically we talk about air having an impedance, and we talk about the inside of cavities having, particularly in windows, having a different impedance. And so there's a mismatch there, and so there's going to be something weird going on at those boundaries. And one of the ones that we're probably familiar with is a megaphone. Okay, and we say, well, megaphones, what do they do? They just concentrate the sound, so they point it in a certain direction. Well, that's not quite true. It's close, but it's an impedance matching device. And I will try to do this by talking directly this way and then putting my hands like this. And you see something changed, right? It didn't just get louder, but the tone quality changed. Okay, and what that means is that something, that the difference between what was coming out of my mouth and hitting the air is different, okay? And it's different for other frequency, for the overtones of my voice. They're being treated differently than what they came out of my mouth. And so the higher ones are being emphasized by this sort of device. And so it's actually a better device than this, okay? Unfortunately, we weren't built with that. So anyway, we have this. And that carries over into a lot of things. And this is a microwave horn. There's a piece of rectangular plumbing that we call a waveguide. And basically, if we want to transmit waves out of that, we put this impedance matching device, and it has some directivity in it, and also allows more of the energy to come out of the waveguide and into the air. Another example is a bugle, where I have a lot of constant diameter tubing, and then there's a bell on the end of it, and it would sound drastically different if that bell wasn't there. And the bell adds some directivity and allows more of the energy to go out of the bugle, and so you get a louder sound. It can't let all of it out, because if I let all of it out, I wouldn't have resonance inside the tubing, so I still need to have some bouncing back, but that's an important thing. Also happens on circuit boards. These are two different kinds of microstrips. When I'm trying to send a signal from one to another, that basically it's a tough thing, and I'm going to get some reflections, and I can reduce those if it's wide frequency band. That a horn-shaped kind of interface helps, and I can do that kind of thing. This is kind of a weird one, cavity magnetrons. This is an Army video from World War II, where they're trying to say that this radar source is like blowing air across a pop bottle. That basically what happens is that air going across the pop bottle, induces resonance inside this chamber. If I create something with a lot of resonant chambers next to each other, in this case in a circle, and I run some electrons around in there, I can create resonances in here, and I get electromagnetic radiation, in this case a very small wavelength. We call these microwaves. Okay, and this allowed us, before they had this source, The radar installations in England were in big towers, and they were using wavelengths that were meters long, and the antennas had to be even longer. And you can't put those in an airplane. And so if you make the wavelength small, like a centimeter or so, then you have a source that is easier to do. And you can see the size of the cavity magnetron. This is only a few inches in diameter. This source is very easy to put in an airplane. And they were able to create radar sources and have radar in airplanes. These were also used in microwave ovens for quite a while. Okay. And here's another resonant cavity that maybe some of you know about, and that's I have some sort of source that emits light when I put some sort of energy into it. I put a mirror on one end, and a good mirror on one end, and a not so good mirror on the other end, and it reflects back and forth, and wow, I got a laser. Okay, cool sort of thing, but very similar to a woodwind instrument where well, in this case, probably a clarinet, where I've got a blocked end and then a leaky end, and I've got some resonance going on in between. Okay, so just as the last thing that I want to say is science people think a lot about music. And this is Voyager 1 and 2 were our first deep space probes where we were to tell the rest of the universe, or the universes beyond, that we were here and who we were. And what they decided was one of the most important things to send was music. And so they created a record with lots and lots and lots of different genres of music on them and sent them out and said, this is part of what humanity is. Okay, so there's my talk.